I never asked for this. I never asked for this burden.
Hello, and welcome back to Watching Brief for the 25th of October 2021. I am joined by my fellow sheep person, Mr. Andy Brockman. Good afternoon, Andy.
Good afternoon, sheep person Mark. Good afternoon, sheep viewer.
Good afternoon indeed. All will become clear in this instance.
I blooming well hope so, because that's one of the strangest openings we've ever done. Anyway, go on.
It is. But regardless of our sheepy status, where there's a wool, there's a way. You will have to. You will have to. have to hold on just for a little longer to find out the point of this. But then again, it will be in the title of this video. This week's Watching Brief is our Muppet of the month. And this is a Muppet that we hinted at a couple of shows ago. But we wanted to see how it evolved, how it matured, how the mushroom cloud expanded on the horizon of Twitter in particular, because it was around about a month ago, almost to the day, in fact, a day before the day of filming, that Twitter was exploding with the question, who on earth are Celtic Films? Why haven't I been blocked by Celtic Films? Yay, I have finally been blocked by Celtic Films. People were tweeting all sorts, and in fact it's continued right up until a couple of days ago. Misery Vulture on Twitter said, "It's the day that every young Irish child dreams of. I've finally been blocked by Celtic Films." And I have to say, my chance, my Celtic stamp was finally stamped for me. In fact, a day on the 27th of September, when I was blocked by Celtic Films, I did in fact ask if I got a badge or not. I think it's in the post, quite possibly. But we had a whole range of people. We've captured various tweets below in a folder. We'll put the link for you guys to take a look at, with people pondering whether or not they're truly Irish until they've actually been blocked by Celtic Films. And finally, we have Stephen Elliott here saying, "Better late than never, hashtag Celtic Films," and highlighting that he had been blocked. But the question is, Andy, who on earth are Celtic Films, and why, I suppose, we'll come on to, why on earth were people excited to be blocked by them?
This has to be one of the most bizarre social media stories I've looked at in all the time we've been doing this. Celtic Films is effectively one person, because when people started to look behind, and when we started to look behind what was going on and where this had sprung from, we were led to a gentleman called Michael Kingsbury. And a Kickstarter campaign where Mr. Kingsbury was trying to raise in pounds sterling just shy of £73,000 to create something called Druids in quotation marks episode 1. And
this was this was to be a 20-year TV project, I believe.
I'll come to that in a minute.
Okay, yeah.
But what basically the Kickstarter says, this is an independent series on Celtic Druids as they resisted the Roman Empire invasion with its censorship, slavery, and traitor Romano Britain collaborators. We have a brilliant cast of actors bringing it to life. We have filmed a few short scenes in the studio. These are only the beginning to bring the characters to life. We need to film the meeting and dialogue between the gods in a natural, quotes, Iron Age forest with a real set to really bring it to reality. Yeah. And as you say, he goes on to say that this is Mr. Kingsbury is not without ambition. He says in the Kickstarter, we aim to expand the series and film 9 episodes per season with a total of 20 seasons planned. And I'm sorry, it's barking. It
is barking. The thing is, it could be eccentric, though. That's the point. It could just be eccentric. And for example, on Twitter, initially when I first saw him, I saw tweets like this, and people counterpointing his tweet. So, for example, Celtic Films is the first film production company to make a TV series in which Celtic Brehon law, the oldest law in Europe, and the one that gave women equal rights, is prominently featured. In which it is prominently featured. Women's rights is the basis of Celtic Films. And what was interesting there was, on the one hand, I was thinking, okay, well, I mean, it's an assertion, but it's an eccentric assertion. It could be worse. There were academics, for example, from Ireland, who were pointing out that that's not necessarily the case. That this legal provision didn't create a feminist idyll, but it very quickly had turned on its head when it became clear the sheer scale, though, of his blocking endeavours. On Twitter, he said that he's blocked over 250,000 English speakers who are far left extremist globalists. We're starting to hear some high pitched whistling, I think, there, just a little bit. Blocking over 1,000 neo-Marxists, Gaelic speakers who are pro-destruction of Scotland and Ireland, and globalist types is nothing. So he's more than just eccentric. He's actually, how would you describe it?
I would say that we've had some fun with this, but this is the serious point.
Yeah.
Now, I could have gone on to look at, for example, Mr. Kingsbury's record on the Internet Movie Database, where he has a record as a writer, a director, a cinematographer, a producer, an editor. He's part of the visual effects department. He's been an art director. He's been a set director. He's also done sound. He's been a casting director, and he's done camera. And
so he's an auteur.
He's an absolute auteur, because basically his previous work on the IMDb, he's done everything. Now, that is either because he can't get anybody to work with him, or he can't afford to have anybody else work with him. Now, again, if you look at his record, up until now, he's shown no real interest in the Celtics, as he calls them.
We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that in a bit. His previous work, and there are 3 principal films listed on the IMDb, and they're all about the Russian gulags, the Soviet gulags. And they appear to fall into a kind of genre of sort of horror, maltreatment sort of type of videos, the kind of straight to video real bit nasties that were set in concentration camps, things like that. It's and there appears to be a strong slant on some put it this way, women are put into these very stressful situations.
He's claiming that it's anti-leftist propaganda, highlighting how the Soviet Union treated women. We can't use the word here on YouTube or in this podcast, but it includes the most extreme violence that can be wrought upon a woman, and he seems to have a bit of a problem in terms of his obsession with women's bodies. For example, here. Celtic Films on Twitter. In our Celtics series, the Druid women are dressed very respectfully. They don't need to show B or T or cleavage to get attention. We show their brains and courage. In fact, they are fully clothed as Druid goddess women are. #RespectWomen. Now, again, at first glance, that could be seen as a slightly eccentric thing to say, but actually, not long after or before that on the thread, you come across another tweet from the same account. I watched with the sound off and this video and saw a traditionally dressed young woman with bosoms just bursting to break out of her traditional low-cut alluring dress. Then I turned on the sound and she sounds very different. An irony of ironies, this is actually a TikTok video. TikTok video by Miss Punny Penny, or Punny Penny, who is sharing the Scottish word of the day. In this case, it was scomfish. And she was explaining what scomfish meant, and she is a Scottish woman. And for some reason, this person who was trying to make this Celtic Films, Celts TV series occur, didn't like the sound of a Scot talking. It's hypocrisy, it's obsession with women's appearance, its ironic representation of women's rights, and claiming, for example, that the powerful Celtic druid Queen Maeve, who lived at 3000 BC, although apparently fought off the Romans, 3,000 years before the Romans appeared.
Don't obsess about the timeline. Keep it. It's literary license.
He highlights how powerful Maeve was, but then highlights also as well how she was married off to the King of Ulster and also subject to sexual violence. This is a very dark undertone, and on the one hand we've got the historical inaccuracies, things like the dates. We've got linguistic problems where he's invented this terminology, Celtics. I've asked just in case I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong. There's no such thing as Celtics. It's come out of nowhere. He's trying to create this narrative that the Western world, the European Union, leftists, Marxists, all this sort of nonsense has created it was founded in this sort of Romanized globalist sort of agenda that he's imagining suppressed and aimed to disappear the Celts of old. And of course, this is also always based on people's appearances. There's again, we've collected an awful lot of this stuff into that folder below. Please do check it out. But for example, we have here one of the scripts where people are told, I see our Celtic people told our skin is too alba, too white, our eyes are too blue, that we must be made to feel ashamed, feel guilty for being who we are. Pause. Our sovereignty and our borders crushed, our nation our nation crushed, our people enslaved. It's dog whistle. It's the Great Replacement. It's everything that particular part of the political spectrum fantasizes about. And actually, there's also a tweet here that we've captured where someone suggests that he's far too excited about this stuff. But again, I can't say what they're suggesting he's doing. And you're absolutely right. Look, this fits into tropes that have been around for a large part of the 20th century into the 21st century in terms of this sort of perversion of the history of what's now Western Europe. With a people or peoples that have been called the Celts and other things at various times. There's a very good piece on a website called Bella Caledonia, which we're going to link to as well, which it's entitled Fascist Fantasies and the Celts, which actually uses this particular controversy as a springboard. Look, I'm really torn by this in the end because torn. Yeah. I see what you did there. The Torn is a wonderful piece of early medieval Irish literature. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely, the cattle raid of Cooley, as it's called when it's translated into English. But this thing is absolutely full, as you say, of far right dog whistles, and indeed of anti-Semitic dog whistles. The idea of it talks a lot about globalists, and that is well recognized as an anti-Semitic trope. So this is serious stuff. At the same time, if you look at Mr. Kingsbury's record, he on Amazon, he's described as a radical filmmaker in the trail for one of his videos.
That Gulag the Turka.
It is, but if you look at it, it's very interesting because if you look at the ratings, it's 48% 5 stars and 38% 1 stars, and only a little bit in between. And that suggests a number of, first of all, it can suggest that there's been some kind of orchestrated campaign one way or the other. Now, obviously, we can't prove that, but it's not a normal distribution of Amazon ratings.
No.
And
well, might I speculate that this 5-star review here from a Celtic sounding Marc, Maerch. I love it when people put AE in the middle of words for no reason, so they look more Celtic-y. Heavy subject that most people do not know nothing about. This movie is about Soviet genocidal crimes against Europeans. It's a heavy topic, and because of the eerie silence on this topic in the media, it falls on the shoulders of this filmmaker to provide the viewer with many of the statistics that through education should have provided. Okay, that a thorough education should have provided. This is an educational film wrapped in a romantic drama to bring humanity into the cold figures of 65 million Soviet murdered Europeans. What better way to underscore this than placing a love story at Vorkuta, the coldest city in Europe. The filmmakers made other films set in the Soviet Gulag system. I look forward to seeing them. 65 million murdered. That means there are at least 65 million stories that must be told. I hope other filmmakers are brave enough to do so. So that I would suggest has been written by the director himself, surely.
Although I suggest this one wasn't.
No,
this is a verified purchase. It's 1 star from somebody called Crusader, so equally strange handle there. But anyway, the 9 people on the cover of this so-called movie are the entire cast. This was made in someone's backyard. Don't waste an hour or something of your life on watching this crap. Horrible! 4 exclamation marks.
Yeah.
And perhaps Elena, another verified purchase. 1 star, fascinatingly bad movie. Watch this movie if you want to see what an obvious lack of talent and resources looks like in the world of movie making.
Now, at this point, what I'll do is I'll show you guys, and also obviously if you're listening on audio only, a little clip from the Facebook page, just for context. Here is a clip of apparently a Celtic Pictish woman in front of some Neolithic monuments, I believe, exclaiming just how the struggle against the Romans in 3000 BC is something that she didn't want to. She didn't ask for this.
I never asked for this. I never asked for this burden. I never wanted to be the one to decide the things on the battlefield.
Now, to be fair, we shouldn't be too harsh on the actors in these clips. They've been cast in a role by the same person who's written the script, by the same person who selected that clip, by the same person who's put that green screen background behind them, by the same person who's using that clip in a particular context to promote what they see as being a high-quality production, but clearly hasn't been selected very well. So we shouldn't blame the actors involved, regardless of what they've been told, and hopefully they've been paid for their work. I truly hope so. But it is in the context of really...
Whatever they've been paid, it's not nearly enough.
No, it's not. But it is in the context of really poor quality writing and, if nothing else, historical research. After all, this is an archaeology channel. This notion, for example, there's a still here from the website which has Ogham all over it, by the way. Ogham wasn't a writing that was used until after the Romans, more or less, or coinciding with the leave of the end of the very end of the Roman presence in Britain. But apparently here it was being used in 3000 BC, 3040 odd years before the Romans arrived. There's a still here that has Maeve, incredible story told by the Druids, censorship by the Roman Empire, her true story finally told here. It's fantasy. It's fantastical. It's ridiculous. And the thing is, it's not fantasy in a positive way or in a genre way. It's fantasy which is fueling a very particular man's ego. This man who apparently has his fingerprints all over this. And actually, he tweeted this more or less as a statement. Unbridled man, he tweeted. Man as ram. The powerful male is back on this 20-year TV series. Get used to it, he says, with this picture of him sort of And to be fair, he's quite a good-looking guy. He's got a nice chiseled jaw and he's got muscles, but he doesn't make him a great film.
He's straight out of Nat Geo Central casting presenter.
Yeah, he is. But I'm not. So in that sense, maybe he should just be front of camera. Maybe he shouldn't be doing everything on these productions. In response to those sorts of sentiments, for example, another tweet on Celtic Films: "A tough land makes for tough people. The director of Celtics, the series, is very tough." Kenny Burns on Twitter, who I do believe is a Scottish citizen, said, "What the actual F? The director of the Celtics series is very tough. I peed myself laughing more than Angus MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod pees his kilt, and as any good Highlander fan knows, aye, Angus pees his kilt all the time." It is rightly ridiculed, this, but I mean, should it be commended in that sense for having a dream? I mean, is this even a remotely realistic prospect? Never mind the unreal aspect of the history and the politics that's on the show.
Look, I mean, there's the famous song about if you say it's famous part of my childhood, about a ram who bashed his head against a dam and eventually broke it. It's called High Hopes. And
well, he did describe himself as man as ram. So
that's what made that. Yeah, well, that's what maybe brought it to mind from my my deep Celtic, my deep Celtic subconscious, my deep non-Celtic subconscious. But look, I think I'm not going to knock anybody who tries to create art. And for every piece of great art, there are many more pieces of art that fail or aren't nearly so great or whatever. But I think this is just so out of left field and so unrealistic that it sits in a very, very odd place. Look, I think it's worth looking at, for example, the Kickstarter. And he was looking, Mr. Kingsbury was looking for, as we said earlier, in pounds sterling, £72,000, just nearly £73,000.
Yeah.
Now, if I tell you that a very basic documentary these days costs about £80,000 minimum, and that's really, really basic with very little location shooting,
and using sort of open source footage, not very little licensed.
Absolutely, public domain photographs, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Every corner cut.
Yeah.
So something going out on Nat Geo or History or one of the terrestrial channels, whatever. Yeah. That's a very basic setup. You compare that then to a drama series, which is really what he's talking about. He's pitching a drama here. He's pitching something that is at least a third again as long as, in fact, no, twice as long in terms of seasons as Game of Thrones. And if I tell you that Series 8 of Game of Thrones, the budget would have been around, $90 million for the whole season, which is around $50 million per episode. Yeah. You can see the gulf here between ambition and reality.
Yeah, $15 million per episode.
Per episode.
Yeah. And
now, a lot of that, a big chunk of that is going into fees for the principal cast. There were salaries in the region of $500,000 per episode being talked about.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you just look at the scale of a major, and he talks about visual effects and things like that. Game of Thrones, which is probably, again, it's the nearest analogy we've got to the ambition here. 40 visual effects houses in 13 countries worked on Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Over 13,000 separate visual effects shots in the first 7 seasons.
No, exactly, and especially if he's talking about representing goddesses and these sort of surreal moments, which in the footage that we've lifted from the Facebook page and that we're using under fair use, I should underscore that, for in terms of criticism and comment. He's attempted he's attempted to represent a surreal moment in that sort of flashing of colours, but it's just not quite up to that standard. So
look, I'm sure that the Irish film industry and Northern Ireland was the base for much of the shooting of Game of Thrones. Titanic Studios in Belfast, they had 6 separate stages in use for Game of Thrones. Yeah. I'm pulling these figures from an article in Forbes magazine, where, for example, in terms of the Northern Ireland economy, over the 8 seasons that they shot, they employed something like almost 13,000 extras across the series and 2,000 crew.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the thing is, I know from personal experience just how much Game of Thrones has benefited the Northern Irish economy. We have obviously family over there. Mrs. Soup's parents, Mrs. Soup grew up there, and seeing, if nothing else, some of the novelty that's been brought into local shops, the footfall. There are certain parts of the country now which are regularly visited because they featured on that TV series. We're talking about a scope here that has the potential to fundamentally change the economics of a country. And that's not something that can be supported with £76,000 on crowdfunding, on a Kickstarter. No. The thing is that to one side, the scope and the ambition to one side, I don't want to necessarily big this guy up too much, because frankly the fundamental quality of what he's doing is not only rife with hypocrisy, as we've touched on when it comes to women, for example, but
allegedly.
Allegedly. No, but what we've actually seen on Twitter, he puts out these things which are utterly hypocritical, or at the very least, very difficult to reconcile. But also as well, it's the appropriation. I hate to use that word, but with this, the appropriation of Celtic culture. It's misplacing it in time. It's misplacing it in terms of its archaeological setting. It's misplacing it in terms of the artifacts and the linguistic capabilities in terms of written language that we're aware about. And it's also a pastiche. It's a fetishization of war, of primitivism. This idea of struggling, this idea of the plucky underdog. I understand why all of these things are compelling, but a whole culture, or a whole series of Iron Age cultures, it does not make, and it does not accurately represent. This isn't taking pride in an idea of Celtic ancestry, or even, frankly, something a bit more generic and race-based. This isn't taking pride in anything along those lines. This is a representation that's fundamentally actually about victimization. The idea that the Roman world was done to the Celts, that the modern world is somehow being done to people to this day. It's misplaced, misguided, misinformed, mispitched, and frankly, it is ridiculous. But in that sense, I suppose on the final note, Andy, do you think therefore actually archaeology Twitter, Celtic Twitter, languages Twitter, history Twitter, or Twitter itself, seemingly, that we overreacted to this particular Muppet, in so much as, is he just ridiculous? Is it simply a Muppet of the month? Ha ha ha. Or were we right actually to actually point this out as being as in some places dangerous as it actually is?
That's a really important question, and I think it's actually the most important question in all this. Particularly people in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, people of with those cultures as a heritage, have had a lot of fun and also been quite angry at this. We talk a lot these days about cultural appropriation and how inappropriate it is, and this is certainly cultural appropriation, but it's also, and I think this is the real point, and the reason why it's worth actually discussing at length. And we've had a laugh, and we pointed out how absurd it is, and how, you know, the vision can never match the reality when you're trying to, you know, fund Game of Thrones on a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But we have to go back to those far right tropes, the grand replacement theory, the idea of cultural genocide, the idea above all that the Roman Empire was this globalist conspiracy against free peoples, knowing that globalist is a far right trope, as we said earlier, which is used by people who are anti-Semitic.
Yes.
And so in the end, although we can have a lot of fun with it, although we can hold this whole enterprise up to ridicule, I don't think we can afford to just let it pass, because when these far right anti-Semitic tropes are allowed to go unacknowledged, they can be a gateway to much more sinister things than just throwing away a few dollars on a Kickstarter that's never going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, in the worst case, this kind of cultural appropriation, this kind of misuse of history, as we've seen sadly in the all too recent past, can end up in things like somebody walking into a mosque with an assault rifle.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I suppose I would just finally say that it also as well is something that it's not just done by that extreme either. This sort of fundamental misunderstanding of, for example, the course of European history is something that we've seen in this country being misunderstood, shall we say. I won't go so far as to say misused, but misunderstood for very particular purposes, very particular political reasons. You know, this idea of, I do believe our glorious Prime Minister, when he was Foreign Secretary at some point, made a comparison between the Roman Empire and the European Union. The idea that, you know, well, the Romans tried to rule us and they couldn't, and now Europe's tried to, you know, whatever people try to. There's a reason, folks. There's a reason, guys at home, girls at home, everyone at home. There's a reason that historians are required. There's a reason that archaeologists are required. There's a reason that we do this stuff. And that is in order to present to you good ideas that you can play with, that you can have fun with, that you can connect together and come up with new exciting questions and answers. But also as well, in order to actively explain why this sort of reconfiguration of history is incorrect and at times dangerous. I think as much as we've started in a place of muppetry, this comes really to the heart of why archaeologists and historians are a good thing, is that it stops people from creating this weird pastiche and then presenting it for whatever agenda, whether it's relatively benign political persuasion or whether it's downright sinister narratives about all manner of different conspiracies and identities. This is the stuff of history.
It is the stuff of history. There's one point I would make just on what you've just been saying, though, and that is that archaeologists aren't somehow immune from all this. I just have to say one word, which is the Ahnenerbe. Yeah. The Nazi cultural organization where archaeologists were employed in pursuit of the kind of far-right ideology that is now seeping into this kind of cultural appropriation.
Yeah, well, and hence ideas plural, which doesn't mean ideas plural. If anyone's feeding you one, you know, then often it leads to dangerous places.
Yeah,
or at the very least, wrong places, inaccurate places, ill-informed places. Thank you guys for watching. This has been an interesting one for us to construct this week, in so much as we wanted to highlight the seriousness of it in terms of the different sort of aspects, but also as well the ridiculousness of it. Hopefully we've managed to walk a line there. Thank you for Andy for your time this week, Andy. You've had particular gremlins and technical issues in the background there, so thank you for bearing through that this week. Any final words?
Just that going back to the basic Muppetry, anybody who thinks by blocking somebody you're going to stop them looking at what you're actually doing, when you've got a publicly accessible website, a publicly accessible Facebook group, and has he ever heard of alternate Twitter accounts so that people who've been blocked can actually look at things? You know, I mean, I'm sorry. The whole point, it's just, the whole thing is just absurd.
It is. The ridiculous Celtic films. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I never asked for this. I never asked for this burden.